One of the final pieces for this cabinet are the doors, and I've got everything milled up to 3/4 of an inch thick and 3 inches wide for the rails and stiles. For the rails, the length, I've got it cut to 22 5/8, and that's the exact length between the stiles because I'm using dowels for the joinery. So the first thing I need to do is route a 1/4 inch groove on the rails and the stiles for the plywood. And for the rails, I'm actually going to be routing a groove all the way through from end to end for the plywood. And for the stiles, I'm going to be cutting a stopped groove for the plywood. On the stiles, I have a mark in here to help me remember on which side needs to go down and get the cut. And on the other side, I have a line to help me determine where I need to plunge this down on the router and start to cut all the way over to the end where I have another line. Let's see if I can get that on here. Where I have another line to help me determine when I need to pull it up or stop the router. And on the router fence, I have these lines here to tell me where my bit starts and stops. So I'm using this cheap $10 or $15 doweling jig for this operation. I'm using the 3/8 inch collet and 3/8 inch dowels for this operation. And I've gone ahead and got this just clamped up sitting here on my bench, and I've got the pieces laid out exactly how they're going to go once this is glued up, because I use this to mark both reference faces to drill the dowels. So I'm going to put a total of three dowels in each piece. So I'm marking 3 lines here, roughly centered between the top and where my groove starts. To use the jig, I line up the reference lines on the jig with the lines that are on the board. I clamp it down, and then I use a 3/8 inch drill bit with a collet guide to drill the holes out. And once all the holes are drilled in the rails, I focus on drilling the holes in all of the stiles. I'm pre-drilling some holes for the hinges, and each door will require 3 hinges due to the size of the doors. And I'm using some soft close hinges for this cabinet. And as you can see, the cabinet's already pre-finished. I just didn't have the room to finish the cabinet and all of the doors, so the cabinet's already finished. But I'll show you how I did that later. And I'm marking a center line, reference line for the doors to drill out the 1 3/8 inch Forstner bit for the cup. And to keep everything square, I'm using a combination square when I'm drilling the hinge here on the door itself to make sure that I don't run into any problems later on. And then hopefully, if everything is correct on the door and the cabinet, it should line up and pop right in. Okay, so let me show you a pretty cool trick on the doors here. Typically, you'd put hardware on the doors. But my friend didn't want any hardware on it. He wanted to stay, a sleek look. So he came up with the idea of using some little magnetic spring-loaded openers on it. And I found these 3-inch frame openers from Lee Valley that actually push the door open when you push it. And I replaced the tip of this with a magnet so that they actually catch on the door. They're pretty easy to install. They have a removable little bracket that this connects to. Just got to set it back 1/8 of an inch, give or take, and use some number 5 steel screws. And the tip here is adjustable, so if you get it too far back or too close within reason, you can adjust the tip in or out to help open and close the door. To get started, I'm drawing some center lines. From the top, I just eyeballed where I thought the center of the stile was. Use a combination square to make sure that it's square. And now that it's square, I'm going to go ahead and pre-drill the rest of the holes and screw them in. And I'm using a blue Sharpie to transfer my mark for the magnet on the door. I got a piece of masking tape on the door. What I'll do is close it, open it up, and now that's my spot for the magnet on the door. Using a 1/4-inch Forstner bit. And to hold it into place, I'm just using some CA glue. Got the magnet glued on this side, so now it's just as simple as sliding it into place. And it's time to make some shelves, 15 shelves to be exact. There's no fun here. They're just 3/4-inch thick shelves that were 7.5 inches wide and roughly 18 inches long. To begin with, I'm using a pre-stain conditioner. I'm going to apply it with a stain pad, and I have each of the boards sanded up to 180 grit. I have the pre-stain conditioner poured into a second container so it's easier to access. Get it on all surfaces, including the end grain. And now that I have it applied, I'm going to take a cotton rag and wipe off the excess. It's important to wipe off all the excess and not leave any of the pre-stain conditioner on the surface. And now what I'm going to do is let this set to the side and dry completely before I apply this stain in a couple of hours. After the pre-stain conditioner dried, I sanded everything back with 180 grit sandpaper to smooth it back out. So now I'm going to go ahead and apply the stain. Since I have 15 of these to do, I've opted to use a foam roller, and I've just got it over here in a tray with some aluminum foil. And the key with this is to get it on the surface and then immediately wipe it back off. So now that I have the whole surface covered, I'm going to use a cotton cloth to wipe it off. And a little tip, if you have an area that's dried and it is streaky, just apply some more stain to the area, work it in, and then wipe it back off. It will move the stain around a little bit. So now that it's dried, I'm going to go ahead and set it to the side and repeat that for the other 14 shelves. I'm putting a total of 2 coats on the boards with the stain, so after the first coat's dried, I go ahead and apply the second coat using the same foam roller. In between coats, I put the foam roller in the refrigerator in a plastic bag to keep it fresh so I can reuse it on the other coats. And just like before, wipe it on and then immediately wipe it off with a cotton rag. So after 2 coats of stain, I went ahead and applied the first coat of finish. I'm using a semi-gloss, high performance from General Finishes, and I applied it just using a foam brush. After that first coat dried, I sanded with 400 grit, and now I'm ready to apply the second coat. And I did not seal these boards with any shellac before applying the top coat, so I did get a little bit of bleeding back on the roller, but it's no big deal. It didn't affect the outcome of the stain or the appearance. It still looks the same. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to do the top side and all of the edges, let it dry, then flip it over, and then get the back side. And finally, I went ahead and put the back on this cabinet. Required 2 separate pieces due to the size of the cabinet. And to hold them into place, I'm just using some brass screws that I pre-drilled into the back. And to install the LEDs, I just fished them through the hole in the back that I cut out earlier in the build. And they're adhesive back, so you just got to pull the paper off the back and they stick right up in the groove that I cut. And one thing that I forgot to mention and show is that I cut a notch in the vertical dividers so that I could feed the LEDs through the top notch. I think the LEDs added a nice touch to the cabinet. And I used some Velcro tape to keep the power brick connected to the back of the cabinet so it doesn't dangle. Well, I appreciate you sticking around for the build. I don't typically release multiple parts, but this one required it. It was a large build and took me a couple months, but it was a fun project. I'm really happy with the outcome, and so is my friend. He really likes it. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next build.